The housing crisis, in particular statutory planning, it's a system that's been broken for years. There is a nationwide shortage of statutory planners. So technology is the only way to solve the problem. So our vision is to simplify planning for everyone. So we want to simplify it for town planners, simplify it for applicants, simplify it for the state government. And the way that we do that is we've created an AI digital assistant, and essentially it's just like a planner, like a human planner.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another executive interview. Today we are diving into the realm of groundbreaking innovations in the planning and development market, and I'm thrilled to have here with us today Tim Golsby-Smith, the co-founder and CEO of MyLot. MyLot is on a mission to revolutionize legislative compliance in the planning and development industry, and we can't wait to delve into the details. Tim, it's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Rhythm.
Amazing. Now, Tim, let's start with the question. Why have you chosen to focus on the planning and development market?
We're looking at the planning and development market because it's really in focus right now because of the housing crisis. In particular, statutory planning. It's a system that's been broken for years. Councils have really been struggling to meet the demand of applications that are submitted to them. They're taking hundreds of days, sometimes years, to process the applications. That all the stakeholders around the system are getting really frustrated. Homeowners are frustrated, the state government's frustrated, councils themselves are really breaking under the strain, developers are frustrated. So it really is a broken system. Another really important component that's driven us to focus on this market is there is a nationwide shortage of statutory planners. So the average vacancy rate at councils is 30%. We're working with one council that has 40 statutory planners, and they've got 25 roles they're advertising for. They've been advertising those 25 roles for 3 years. So technology is the only way to solve the problem. Adding fuel to the fire, state governments are all pledging for more and more development. So in New South Wales, the state government has pledged for 1 million new homes over the next 5 years. So the industry is already at breaking point, and this is just going to bring it to its knees. There is no solution in the market, so it is truly open space, and the problems are ubiquitous worldwide. So both the problems that countries and council areas around the world are facing with the housing crisis and the way they manage their development applications, what we're doing here in Australia will actually be something we can replicate overseas too.
I understand. That's actually very fascinating. Now, understanding the market focus, let's dive into your customer base. So who are your customers and how big is the market opportunity?
So if you look at statutory planning, the system, there is actually a web of customers around that system. But at the centre, you have councils. So they are the regulator of the system. They employ the town planners who do the assessing of all the applications that go through. There's 570 of them in Australia alone. And they're the ones that are really feeling the pain. They're the ones that are losing all this money, millions of dollars for each council to deliver the service. And they're the customer where we've kind of seen we can really release the most value. So a 10% increase in efficiency for a council in their DA process will bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue each year. And more importantly, the modelling we've done with one of the councils we're working with, a 10% increase in efficiency will bring forward economic development to the tune of $50 million per year annually. So it's huge value we can unlock. Now they buy enterprise software. It's the nature of what they do. They're happy to spend $100,000 to $200,000 on enterprise software, with recurring, license fees. So even if we look just at the planning market in Australia alone, if we look at a 30% market capture, that's $20 or $30 million of recurring revenue just on the planning product. Now, we then plan to monetize the other customer groups. The professional planning industry is another one, referral agencies, architects, building compliance. So in Australia alone, we've got line of sight to $50 to $100 million revenue business, but our ambition is definitely global. So we're already talking to some councils in Italy as well as the UK. So we're really excited by the size of the market and its potential.
Amazing. That's indeed very impressive. Now, can you tell us what sets MyLot apart from other solutions in the market, and how does this innovation ensure a sustainable competitive advantage?
Yeah, sure. So any attempts to digitize legislation, whether it's in planning or financial legislation in the past, what people have done is they've created rules engines. And essentially what a rules engine is, it is an attempt to take legislation and then, I guess, identify what you think are the most likely use cases that you want to push through. So for a council, they might choose 100 or perhaps 1,000 specific rules that they want to digitize. For example, if I want to do a duplex in a high density residential zone, it needs to be 2 stories, that'll be one use case and it will have a specific set of legislation that applies to it. Or if I have a rural lot and I want to build a big shed for all my tools, it'll be called a rural store, but it needs to be a certain distance from other residential houses. It needs to be a certain size, and then there'll be certain rules that apply. Right. So even identifying the 1,000-odd rules you might want to digitize is an incredibly exhaustive process. It takes months and months and months. They're very expensive to implement. And even when you have the rules there, they, in no way can they accommodate for the myriad of different ideas that people actually want to explore on their property. And so you're pushing people through this kind of finite set of rules that doesn't actually match to their experience. It falls out of date as soon as it's implemented. If the legislation changes, if mapping changes, the whole system becomes irrelevant. Right? So what we've seen is in Australia, there's only been 20% of the councils that have even attempted to take up e-planning, and most of them have actually abandoned it. So now we have a situation where almost the whole market are using archaic, out-of-date solutions that are siloed and not talking to each other, very much pen and paper. So it really is right there ready to be grabbed. Our solution is completely different. So our vision is to simplify planning for everyone. So we want to simplify it for town planners, simplify it for applicants, simplify it for the state government. And the way that we do that is we've created an AI digital assistant. And essentially, it's just like a planner, like a human planner. It's able to talk to a customer, understand what they want, ask them just the questions it needs to ask to be able to unearth exactly the legislation that applies. So they can see, if they need to do something, are they allowed to do it? Do they need permission? If so, why? And they can do that in a really human way. Now, importantly, in regards to differentiation, this is not something that you can just take the legislation and throw it at GPT, because legislation it has logic embedded in the document. So there's half language and half rules. There are lots of if this, then that type statements. There's lots of dependencies. There's references to other parts of the legislation, other acts. So a planner needs to understand the logic as well as the words to be able to reason their way through the document and to be able to iteratively mine for the right context from a customer. So our IP is really unique because half of it is technical. We've orchestrated this group of AI generative engines that all work together to replicate how a human does kind of step-by-step reasoning through the legislation. But the other part of the IP is deeply understanding planning professionals, how they think, how they navigate the legislation to identify what really matters.
Amazing. Tim, I have to say that sounds like a very unique use case and very interesting application of AI. Now let's talk about the team that has built the product. Can you share something about your team?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited by our team. For me, I was a COO of a strategic innovation firm. We built that up and sold it to Accenture in 2017. I then worked as a director of operations at Accenture Strategy across Australia and New Zealand for 5 years before leaving for this opportunity. Our head of customer is Alex, and he has worked as leading design teams for ANZ Bank, for Salesforce, and for other really big, exciting global companies. On the tech side, we have Ash and Iad, and so they've always worked together for the last 10 years. They worked in Asia. They built from the ground up iFlix, the application. They managed a team of 200 programmers. iFlix went head-to-head with Netflix, so it's a very, very kind of big and successful program in its time. They were in 30 countries. They had 30 million monthly users. So super experienced kind of Silicon Valley level tech expertise. In Australia, they've spent a whole lot of time in the financial industry. So they led the incubator for one of the large banks. They've really specialised in financial legislation. But when they saw what we were working on, they decided to exit that business and join us as co-founders. So all four of us are co-founders in the business. We all have equity, and we're super excited to work together.
Amazing, very exciting. Now, collaborating with government bodies like the Victorian Department for Planning and Transport and Yarra Ranges Shire Council is indeed very impressive. So can you tell us, how do these partnerships actually play into MyLot's expansion strategy, and what benefits do they bring in terms of scalability and credibility?
Yeah, good question. So we're really fortunate to have Yarra Ranges as a foundational customer. We've been working with them since the beginning. They're one of the largest councils in Australia. They have over 55 suburbs, a big mix of rural and residential kind of mixed use commercial zones, so very kind of complex from a planning perspective. Their team have had a vision for this solution for 15, 20 years, but just have never had the partners to be able to execute on the vision. So we've co-designed incredibly deeply with their teams. We're testing at the moment daily with their planning teams to make sure our system has the efficacy it needs. And they're really excited to connect us to all the councils that they work with. So they'll definitely help us not only build out a product that resonates, but also then connect through to their peers across the community. The Victorian Department for Planning and Transport, they actually are co-funders for our project. So it's jointly funded by Yarra Ranges and by the department. So we've met multiple times now with the CEO of the department and the CIO of the department. They're incredibly excited by what we're doing. So from a state level, they've really wanted to fund innovation that is able to kind of have an impact on the housing crisis. So our program is like right in their sweet spot for being able to solve that problem. And they're really excited to connect us to other councils too once we launch our product into the market.
Amazing. That's brilliant, Tim. Now, navigating legislative compliance can be quite intricate. So how does MyLot actually manage regulatory risks and stay ahead of the potential shifts or changes in the planning and development regulations?
This is a big paradigm shift for our approach. So as I was saying previously, with a rule-based approach, if there was any change in legislation, the amount of work that it took for the programming teams, the planning teams to update their software was really arduous, took a very long time. With our system, we can take, for example, in Victoria, we can take down the whole ordinance, 1,300 pages of legislation, and then suck it into our engine in under 5 minutes. So we are always up to date. We'll be scanning the legislation, identifying changes, and they'll be implemented before anybody even knows they were there. So that's a real paradigm shift in regards to kind of managing the complexity of evolving legislation that we're really excited about. In regards to managing AI risk, we are implementing the New South Wales Assurance Framework for AI. So they've just released their kind of second version, and it's going to be adopted across the country. And so that's kind of really helping us make sure that the solution that we deliver is best of class in regards to managing risk in AI.
Amazing. That's great that you've taken that into consideration. Now, could you share with us any key milestones that you have achieved so far, and any upcoming milestones as well that investors watching this interview can look forward to as indicators of MyLot's progress?
Sure. So last year we raised $1 million, or just over $1 million, which was really good. We've got some really great investors who are backing us. So for example, we've got Jeff Knox. He was the CEO of Downer EDI, CEO of Hatch Engineering. He was Australia's only ever GM of GE Mining Worldwide. So he's our biggest investor. We also have John Mulcahy as an investor. John Mulcahy was the CEO of Suncorp, and he was on the chair at Mirvac, who we've also worked quite deeply with. So we've got some great investors behind us. I think a big milestone was getting those investors on board, getting those funds that have enabled us, along with our funding from the department and from Yarra Ranges, to be able to get as far as we've gotten. Some other big milestones are, we're now testing our solution with the Yarra Ranges planning team. That's super exciting because I think a lot of the planners just couldn't imagine that a computer, that AI would be able to do the work they do. It's so complicated. The legislation is just so confusing. And, I think that, they were excited, but I think they were doubtful. And the testing has been unbelievable. They've consistently given us 4 or 5 out of 5, assessing our system as though it was a senior planner, and they take 20 years to be able to build up, the knowledge bank to navigate this work. So I think that's another really exciting milestone. We've also been talking to lots of customers in the market, so across Victoria, but also in New South Wales. We just recently spoke a couple of days ago with 8 or 9 councils in a big joint group, and all of them are just really blown away, by what we're doing and can't wait to get their hands on our product. So there are a couple of really exciting milestones. I think the next big one to look out for is we're going to move from testing with councils in the back end to testing with customers. So everyday users who know nothing about planning. And so we'll begin that testing in the next month or 2. And then we aim to be live in Yarra Ranges by the middle of the year.
Amazing, very exciting. We'll keep an eye out for that. Looking ahead, as we conclude this interview, what are MyLot's strategies for scaling the business? Are there any plans to diversify services or expand to different geographical markets beyond the current focus areas?
Absolutely. So as I was saying, the problems in planning are ubiquitous. The housing crisis is happening around the world in all of the kind of first world countries in particular, and the processes they use to govern how planning happens, how approvals are managed, is actually also ubiquitous. So we do plan to move internationally as quickly as possible. But in the first instance, for the first year, we'll double down on Victoria and New South Wales, get the product right whilst we're advancing conversations globally. And then obviously we'll look to take the planning product global. We'll also move horizontally. So I mentioned all of the other customer groups, architects, building compliance, the referral agencies. So whether you're an arborist who needs to do, a report on a property, or a flood specialist, etc., all of that work centres around legislation. So there's 4 or 5 different customer groups that we've identified, and the core capability that we've had, which is this ability to be able to navigate legislation, planning and building legislation, is easily adaptable to any of those different areas. So we really do see this as a super exciting opportunity, and it is an opportunity at global scale.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your valuable insights into the work that you and your team are doing. For anyone who would like to get in touch with the team at MyLot's, simply scan the QR code or see the details in the description of this video. I'll see you all in my next interview. And thank you, Tim, for joining me today.
Thanks, Rhythm. Really appreciated it.